risk is there of extensive flooding? And given the pollutants in the canal, what are the types of environmental and health risks that may pose?
Well, look, at this point, the water is going to, tomorrow morning it'll be all over. It'll be all over late tonight, actually. In the Gowanus Canal, the flooding should be going down in a couple of hours. Anything you want to add on the Gowanus Canal?
Sure. I know the issue that you're referring to in terms of what the water could have. We'll make sure that we don't think there's any immediate danger to anybody, and if there's any issue, DEP will make sure that it gets taken care of. So, as the mayor said, the flooding should proceed with everything else, and we'll clean it up like everything else.
Yes, Miss.
This is for Con Ed. If you do go through with this preemptive power shutdown, how long will it take after the water recedes to actually turn power back onto these buildings? And also, when you talked about the major consumers away from the financial center, where are those buildings located, and what buildings are they?
Okay. Depends on how much damage we have. That would determine how quickly we can get the networks back into service. If salt water gets in on our electrical equipment and salt water gets in on the customer's equipment, and most of the time this equipment is in the basement. So if the streets flood, and we did see some extensive flooding in a nor'easter in 1992, and that's what we're basing our experience on. We need to go back in and we'll replace some of that equipment. We're ready to do that, but again, it depends on how extensive the damage is to our equipment and to the customer's equipment. With respect to the other buildings, I'd say they're throughout the city, mostly in Manhattan. But I think there's one up in the Bronx, a couple in Queens and Brooklyn. But they're complexes like the Kips Bay complex. They were large complexes. It was more efficient for the developer to put in a high voltage system instead of, like I say, the system you might have in your home. It's more efficient to do that. That equipment is a little bit more susceptible to damage when it gets wet.
Will we see the stock exchange closed for a week, for 2 weeks, because they can't restore
I think
power?
it might be a couple of days. But that's one of the things we'd have to get back on. The stock exchange has its own generators, and the stock exchange could run without the power from Con Edison. And that's been practice that's been in place for at least 20 years that I know of. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Two questions. One, have the FDNY and NYPD needed to rescue anyone who didn't comply with your evacuation order? And two, can we get an update on the census numbers in your shelters?
Shelters, last time I checked, had about 3,500 people in them. Is that right, Seth? 3651 to be exact, but I'm just from memory.
We haven't had
anybody.
No.
We've not had to rescue anybody. I think as long as you stay indoors, you're probably safe. You would have been better coming out, and you never know. But so far, there's not been buildings collapsing. I think yes, Miss.
Other than that jogger, there were no injuries that you know of?
Not that I know of. Does anybody have any other reports of? No. Yes, sir.
On Friday, you said that the buildings department inspected this crane. They did it for all cranes because of the approaching hurricane?
Yes, exactly.
So as
and we also, every construction site to tie down all of the construction materials. And I haven't heard of any, I'm sure, I did see on television some debris blowing off a building, but it was a one-story building that looked like an old building, and its roof came off. And there's always going to be, when you have winds this strong, in a lot of these old buildings, you'll see brick coming down, a chimney could fall, and it could kill you. That's why you're just better off staying indoors. But as far as I know, there's not been any massive amount of construction material blown off. And in this day and age, the building department has worked very hard to reduce the danger of working on a construction site or living near it. If you remember, 7 years ago, we had lots of injuries. And in all fairness to Bob Lamandry and his crew, not everybody's been happy when he closes down a site for a safety violation, but I don't think we've had almost no fatalities since then.
That the standards were high enough?
In terms of what?
Well, it was inspected, and now the crane has
Well,
gone.
nobody knows. Just because it's inspected doesn't guarantee that God doesn't do things, or that the metal doesn't fail, or that there's no reason at this point in time to think that the inspection wasn't adequate. We just don't know what has happened, and you can make a story out of it if you want, but until we find out, and incidentally, so far the crane hasn't fallen. Yes, sir.
Two questions. I know this is far from over, can you just give an idea of how severe the storm has been in the context of